Hello everyone and welcome on back to the channel. Today, we're going to take another look at this Specter and get a little rundown on the state of Specter in 2023. Specter was one of the elite specializations that I focused on a lot during the betas of End of Dragons because it introduced one of my favorite elements of gaming, an expansion upon healing and support in the game. And when I mean expansion, I mean ally targeting. It seems to be the most fundamental element of any healer / support class in any MMO. You know, you target your ally and you cast heal, you cast flash heal. But in Guild Wars 2, we never had that. It was always just placing healing in areas or healing that is centered around yourself. So you never had that decision-making element. Well, you had decision-making, but it was in a different way. This, you actually have to choose your targets, and it's very self-explanatory. And over the years, Specter has received some updates and some buffs and some retuning to make it fit a little bit more comfortably in the universe of Guild Wars 2 and the gameplay flow. And of course, we've had recent balance patches trying to tackle the issue of boons, which, you know, is a whole debacle and still kind of continues to be. However, with Specter, they've implemented it in a very interesting way that I actually really enjoy and gravitate towards. Now, while I can praise their successes, there's also a couple faults and maybe missteps which they might have stumbled upon. But we'll get into all of that in this video, going over the state of Specter and kind of having a conversation around alacrity and quickness in the game and how it is implemented effectively and when it's implemented in an effective way. So Specter, as we're going to kind of go over, the auto attack on your scepter introduced your ally target features. And I love that the tooltips are just so large that they actually go over the bounds of my monitor and the screen. But I think the very first ability is called Shadow Bolts. And we're in domain of Korna, I believe. Is this Korna? Yeah, Korna. I was like, is Dan or Korna? We're in the domain of Korna because it's probably the best area to display ally target features and kind of go over it because there's so many allies around you. So as you can see here, you'll fire out projectiles and grant allies barrier if you're targeting an ally. If you're targeting an enemy, it'll just do damage and apply torment. This used to only affect the specific target that you are selecting. Now they have updated it to share to other allies around your target, but at a reduced effectiveness by 50%. So here we're giving the ally 621 barrier. To allies, any allies that would be around the Primeval Archer, it'd be about 310 or so. So you're still getting a lot of use out of choosing the targets that need it by triaging, which I actually really enjoy. It's very different for Guild Wars 2. So you still have the emphasis of triage, but you're not getting totally snuffed from supporting your allies in a group scenario, which I really appreciate and enjoy. In all honesty, I didn't think that the auto attack needed it because the auto attack is so on demand. There's no cost to it. There's no cooldown. I was expecting them to do something along the lines of, you know, the reduced effectiveness to something like your second and third abilities, but they were very friendly with the buffs and made it so your auto attack also is shared to allies around. There's one visual thing that I don't love, and it's that like repeated blue ring that is universal that everyone can see. If this was maybe client side where you see it, that might be a little bit better. And additionally, the radius for your auto attack is perfectly fine, but for things like your second and third abilities, I'd maybe like to see that increased just a little bit, but that's neither here nor there. Very subtle things, which to me might be a little bit bigger than they actually are. So your auto attack applies barrier, does the same thing. You're still applying Rotwallow Venoms, which is a trait, so that you're able to still deal damage by shielding your allies. Whenever they attack, they apply Torment, which we can say, oh, I just attacked the Inquest, didn't mean to do that. Your second ability is the same thing. It's stronger barrier because it's an initiative cost. It's a resource cost. I'm out of range for that. So you're getting stronger barrier, and now it also applies protection, which is an extremely powerful boon at reducing the damage. 33% incoming damage is reduced. And on top of barrier, that means your barrier is going to be a bit more impactful and can persist on your allies for a little bit longer. And yeah, Shadow Sap is really good. The enemy version of this doesn't apply Torment, which has always kind of hurt me a little bit because it's just flat damage and weakness, which is a very important condition. Its weakness is strong, but I've always kind of wanted a little bit of a damaging condition, be it Torment or a Confusion, a stack of Confusion, a stack of Bleeding, something, just something. But yeah, the effectiveness when you're targeting an ally is reduced by 50%, and then also goes for the Boon of Protection. So as it is right now on my current gear, it's about 7 seconds. It'll be applied at a lesser duration to allies around you. As you can see here, it's only about 3.5, 4 seconds or so, but a longer duration on the target. And then we also go into your dual skills. So Specter is currently being paired with an offhand pistol, so you get access to measured shot and endless night. Still, this one is probably my go-to dual wield ability, as opposed to something like the Scepter Dagger, just because you're getting that Shadow Step, you're getting the heal with the bullet, and you're also getting the flip over of Endless Night, which is channeled barrier to the target, allies around, and also regen and vigor. So it's just a whole lot of supportive elements tied to your scepter and pistol, which I really enjoy and gravitate towards, and it's just really strong. So yeah, one is still the same, but you get the added benefit of the area effects. We also have the combo of the Scepter Dagger. We have Twilight combo. Twilight combo is pretty good for damage because you're getting that chill, poison, and torment for a little wider array of condies. Also, the functionality of this ability is still not consistent. It's still pretty bad. It's supposed to act where you're firing a slow-moving projectile, then your second projectile is faster. And when it connects with the slower one, it also speeds that one up. But it's currently not reliable. Oftentimes, the slower projectile will just continue to move at its slow pace, even though the faster one is passing through it. See, right there, it actually worked. Sometimes it doesn't, depending on if you're moving. Sometimes it will. It's just not the most consistent ability in the game. I'd much rather both of them just fire out at a fast rate. I don't know why it's not that. It is cool, but they can't get the animation down. Maybe if this like clung to you and wasn't actually moving forward, I don't know. You're also getting that barrier and healing right then and there, and you're not actually moving yourself around. So maybe you are in a situation where there's, area fields that are damaging and you don't want to have to shadow step to your target, though you, depending on traits that you take, get more healing for doing that. Maybe you want to stay at ranged and just apply your barrier and healing to allies around. But yeah, that's kind of the bigger updates to the Specter, and they're really pleasant. I like that you're still rewarded for having intelligent target choice, but you're not being totally wounded in the department of dealing with multiple allies being damaged, which so often is the case in Guild Wars 2. Now, that being said, I still think that there are abilities and opportunities for certain spells and skills to just heal a specific target. Something along the lines of like an auto attack, not just on Specter, but on something like Staff Guardian, Water Elementalist we saw. I'd still like to see that maybe buffed up a little bit. Things like Druid, even Druid forms. There are certain support and healing elements in the game that I think can be explored in that sense. And then we also have changes to how Alacrity is applied via the Specter. It used to be that Traversing Dusk, your master trait, would apply Alacrity when you shadow step with a well. Now, it no longer does that, but it instead grants resistance, which is still pretty important depending on the game mode. Now, your access to Alacrity is on Shade Step. This is not just allowing you to generate Alacrity, but also enhances your siphon ability by siphoning your ally. Because you'll mark an ally, and when you go into your shroud, you tether to them, and then when you use abilities on enemies, you heal them up, and when you take that trait, you also apply Alacrity to them, yourself, and any allies around your tethered ally. So it really puts the emphasis on making a smart decision on who you are siphoned to. And funnily enough, this siphon effect doesn't actually have, or not the siphon effect, the Alacrity effect, I should say, doesn't actually have a blue ring associated with it, which I think is probably the more weird route to take, because this is a very important tell. But it is a 360 radius, so it is quite forgiving. And no matter where you are connected to your target, you yourself will also gain that Alacrity, which is actually really good, and something that might have been missed on something like Druid's Alacrity Change. But with that being said, as it is your only source of Alacrity generation, it does feel a little bad when you don't have enough resource to get into Shroud when you need to, or maybe you're not wanting to go into Shroud at that moment and you're instead busy doing something else and you want to get access to your utility abilities. It is a little limiting in that way. And I think one area that they can improve on, not just for Specter, but for the other professions that apply Alacrity exclusively with a trait, I would very much appreciate some Alacrity generation in something like your utility skills. And specifically with Specter, the Wells. Well of Bounty used to apply Alacrity if targets didn't have it, regardless of if you were traded for it or not. Currently, it doesn't do that. It will instead apply a set amount of boons if allies stay in that field. So it's always stability and then ticks Might, Fury, Vigor, regen. I would much appreciate if Well of Bounty also applied something like 4 or 5 seconds of Alacrity when you initially cast it at that location for any allies in the area. Just a little extra something to give more flexibility to this fundamental system of Alacrity generation for something like the Specter. If they got rid of Alacrity and quickness in general, we wouldn't have these issues. But since that seems to not be the case at the moment of balanced design, I think it is very important that we have a mixture of profession traits and profession mechanics generating these boons, such as Alacrity, but also balancing that out with on-demand skills. That makes sense. And Well of Bounty would make sense because it's specifically a utility boon skill. It wouldn't really make sense if you put it on something like Well of Sorrow, because then you might be using Well of Sorrow just for that Alacrity generation and not what it's intended to be used for, which is that condition damage. While they might have gone a little bit too hard at removing the Alacrity application on Wellcast, I think there are certain circumstances where a certain skill will make sense with applying that specific boon. And that's where we find Firebrand as a designed profession to be really impactful and have a lot of payoff, because certain utility skills will just straight up give quickness. In the case of Firebrand, it's quickness. It will just give quickness. And then on top of those on-demand skills, we have certain traits within the Firebrand line augment the way that you apply that quickness, so you have even increased flexibility. On top of all of this, there's one thing that I do kind of miss with the recent balancing, and that has something to do with the previous iteration of Shade Step. I really appreciate this current version of the skill, and I'm a big fan of it. However, it used to allow your Siphon to resurrect an ally who is downed. And it was only ally target. It was only on ally target. It wasn't area of effect. You had to specifically choose that target, and it would increase their revive percentage by like 30% or something. That was stripped away because Shade Step was changed. I would personally love if that returned on a trait such as Amplified Siphoning. The second part of this trait, to me, doesn't really excite me enough to really take it or think about taking it. The way this trait functions is gain increased Shadow Force when hitting a foe with Siphon, which I guess is fine. Sure. This could maybe even be higher. But the second part is grant increased barrier when targeting an ally. You're already giving out plenty of barrier, and you're already giving out a pretty strong amount of barrier. Maybe just buff this up baseline by like 10% or something to compensate if someone is taking that trait for that reason. But I'd much rather the second part of this, function to where siphoning a downed ally revives them for a percentage. That would be much more exciting, because then maybe I could take Traversing Dusk off if I really want to, you know, fit a little bit more of a niche of being that targeted resurrector for those allies in those group situations where maybe people are going down a bit more frequently than you would like. But that's my only other recommendation for Specter, is amplified siphoning could be a little bit more exciting, especially when you're looking at the other two traits. Larcenous Torment was just changed to be something really exciting in terms of self-sustain. Traversing Dusk is, and has always been, kind of your go-to for support, just because you're getting that extra heal on Shadow Step and then, you know, augmenting wells. Amplified siphoning is a little meh in terms of its placement and its efficacy. I think it's a very fun elite specialization. It fills a niche and fills a gameplay function that I have long awaited for in Guild Wars 2, and of course with End of Dragons we finally got it. But I'm still waiting for ally targeting features to be filtered more into the game for certain healing weapons and healing skills, just so healers and support players can have a little bit more flexibility and on-demand use, depending on their situations. I'm looking at you, Staff Guardian, and maybe even Staff Necro. Honestly, Staff Necro just needs a redesign. But I digress. This is a video about Specter, so Specter should get the spotlight. Last little thing. Haunt Shot got a bit of an update in terms of its rate of fire, which I like, but there's still something a little clunky about Shadow Shroud in general. I think having your second ability being a ticking damage field might be a little bit better rather than just a big boom and done, because there is something that is very slow about Shadow Shroud, which, I don't know, it feels a little weird from animation to cast time to after casting. I'd like to see it quickened just a little bit, maybe on the auto attack. Maybe on the auto attack and maybe on the second ability having some type of pulsing field, so you're not just like waiting to get very minor hits off. But that's the only other thing that I can think of with Specter at the moment. Also, Barrier and Alacrity as effects do not need to be shown permanently on characters anymore. I'm gonna say it. You could have 5 Barrier and have the same column of light versus someone having maximum half health Barrier having that pillar of light. It's blinding. It doesn't need to be there. Plus Alacrity, I don't need to be on fire all the time with blue fire. That's so unnecessary. Boons in general having visual effects are very unnecessary at this point in Guild Wars 2's life. But I digress even further. Thank you everyone so much for coming on by. Like the video if you liked it. Comment below which profession maybe the rudeness, the disrespect. I'm trying to do an outro here. Comment down below what you would like to see me kind of take another second to look at. Oh, I thought that had collision. That doesn't have collision. And depending on the comments, I might look at Druid next, but if anyone has any other professions or elite specializations that maybe you think deserves a second look at with just balancing, I would love to hear it, and I'll take it into consideration. Thank you everyone to my patrons. That'll really help me out and keep the channel going. If you'd like to support the channel even further, and myself, and also pre-order Guild Wars 2 Secrets of the Obscure, the 4th expansion coming to Guild Wars 2. I have links down below. Thank you so much, ArenaNet. And I'll catch you all in the next one. Bye, everyone!